Right now. All right. Hey, welcome to the Little Athletics New South Wales Sunday Coaching School, everybody. It is great to have you with us. My name is Darren Wenzer. I am the Head of Coach and Volunteer Development with Little Athletics New South Wales. Now, we are very lucky to have Matt Horsnell as our guest today. Now, Matt is currently probably best known as a coach of Nicola McDermott, high jumper, who has, if I'm right, Matt, has a PB of 196. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Matt was a finalist in the Coach of the Year for the 2019 Sport New South Wales Awards, and he was recently awarded the Athletics New South Wales Country Coach of the Year Award. So welcome, Matt. Great to have you with us. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That's a great initiative, Darren, and it's really good to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Excellent. Now, Matt, I'd like to find out a little bit of a background. I wonder if we can go there first. Can we find out a bit from you about where did you grow up and what are your main memories of playing sport as a kid?
Yeah, well, I was pretty lucky, actually. I grew up in Cabramatta, which, Cabramatta in Sydney's west. And in those days, in the 60s and 70s, that was all farms, and we had guys like Stevie Ella, who played for Australia Rugby, and the group. We loved our sport. We just used to play non-stop cricket test matches everywhere with the guys, and rugby league, and we'd just be playing, and we'd just go home when it got dark. That's what it was like in those days, and things were pretty great growing up there. But it's sort of as I progressed, I played a lot of cricket and played a bit of grade cricket for Southern Districts and rep cricket. We played with them before they actually became a grade team. And I think my claim to fame is when we played against Cumberland, Greg Matthews out cheaply, on a game against them. So,
tell us a bit about the story about that. How did you get him out there, Matt?
I was a little nick to the slips with a bit of an off cutter, so it was quite good. Yeah. Because Greg Matthews is a bit of a personality, and he liked to build it up a little bit. So it was quite comforting. But I think we got smashed by Cumberland. So.
And it looks like you're a fairly handy fast bowler, was it, Matt? Were your best? Yeah, 6 for 17. I hear you with your best figures.
Yeah, it was. I used to think I was good until John Skillback was a guy who played for Mossman, who when I went through the school system, I made the CHS team. We played country and that, and didn't quite get there because I had guys ahead of me with John Skillback, who just strolled in and was about 3 times faster than me. So I thought, maybe I'm not that fast anymore. So you see different. But one of the interesting things is in those days, coaching and everything was a bit non-existent. So probably, I thought, if I had a bit of coaching and things like that, it might have progressed, and it sort of probably flared a bit from those days of not having anything, that I like to impart things and bring kids through, and I really enjoy bringing a 12-year-old through to a high level is what I strive to do.
And we'll certainly talk a little bit about that. So you've mentioned coaching. How did it all start, Matt? What brought you into coaching? How did you get into coaching?
Well, I think with most athletics, the drive through Little Athletics, where kids go through and you see a need there to be involved, and a lot of coaches start like that. My kids, like 30, like Alice, my youngest, started at under 7s in WA when we were over there. I think we had Tudor Bitter over there was the first coaching course I did with him and everything in Western Australia, and so it's a need to help out and help the kids progress, and from then it starts to evolve, and it's as your kids progress and they drop out and you're still there and still coaching, and the kids keep getting better, so you must be doing something right.
And just so people have a bit of a feel of some of the things that you've done, Matt, what would you say are some of your favourite coaching moments or achievements?
Yeah, it's like some of the simple things. Like I remember one of the questions you mentioned before is how do you stop a kid hitting the high jump bar, and one of the favourite moments going back years ago, was a young girl who came to us who was 13 or something, and her fear for high jump was grabbing the bar. You know, she would run in and grab the bar. So we did all these drills and things like that. And at 17, she made nationals and jumped 165. You know, it was. Things like that are an achievement, that you progress a kid who can't jump, and she just did it there to not get hurt, to actually jumping a reasonable height, you know, for her age, and just enjoying the sport. I think is a key thing to have as a base.
Yeah, and you've certainly coached from grassroots right up to high performance. Matt, would you like to tell us about some of your high performance athletes who you are or have been involved with?
Yeah, it's interesting. We go back a good 10 years ago, I suppose, or probably a bit longer than that, but 2007, we had Chris Dodd, was a 223 high jumper, which we coached him from about 13 onwards. And he was a bit of a mentor to a lot of the athletes like Nicola McDermott, who's done an Olympic qualifier. Back then, she was just a young kid of 12 or so, you know, and progressing through. And Chris was quite a good role model for those guys. He was really good, really helpful for sharing and bringing him through to a level, and seeing those guys respond to him and me helping them was, you know, it's a bit of a key to having a good group and creating a good culture for the group to build on, I think is important. And now seeing Nicola doing the same thing with a lot of the younger athletes. I mean, having her in Monaco when I'm coaching her in a diamond league, and she jumped and comes third is amazing, and magic moments. And you see her come back, and she's just natural with those kids, and she's not like got any airs and graces. She's just, and they respond to that, you know, young kids. And I think that's important in the sport to maintain that sort of environment. And one of the things we've had when we've been overseas with the Germans, and I've had some good conversations and times with them through coaching and them helping us as well, was all of the elite athletes all come back and help the under 11s, 12s, and have sessions with them in Germany. That's one of the things they always strive to do as well. So that's a really great thing to have, I think.
You've mentioned a bit about travel there. I hear that you spent a little bit of time overseas, Matt. You spent a few days or quite a chunk of your year. Last year, was it overseas?
Yeah, it's with high performance, it becomes a necessity to travel a little bit. You know, we spent a good 2.5 months overseas last year, and almost 3 months if you count in where we came back and then went to world champs and things like that. And, you know, and I quite like sitting around in Brussels and going down to the coffee shops. You know, it's it's a good environment in it, and you have I'm lucky with work, the way we've set it up. I can do some work overseas with computer design work that I do, so it's quite handy having that. So I do a bit of work and sort of have a little coffee shop time, and then go to training. And but it's hard work, you know. You're traveling, with that environment. With Nicola, especially last year, she wasn't cemented into a Diamond League position, so we'd go over there, have a base, and we'd set that up, have an Airbnb that you can get quite reasonably priced, and you'd wait around, train, and you'd have some comps, but then you get called up to a major comp, and bang, you're over in one of the Swedish sites, or wherever, Germany, Tübingen we went, and all of a sudden you pick up routes, jump on a train, and off you go, and you do that. But the important thing is we had a base that was an Airbnb, so that you had for sort of eight weeks solid, that's reasonably priced. Then if you have to shoot off, it's not as bad on the financial pocket, if you like.
I was going to say, a lot of people, Matt, associate you with high jump, but you do coach other events, don't you?
Yeah, enjoy my long and triple, and sprints are a good. I'm lucky over the years. I think it's important that I've got some level 2s and things with other events. I think I've got the walks, relays, long distance. It's throws, because I was masters athlete, and I thought I'll do throws because I enjoy it. And that improved my throws straight away as soon as I did my coaching level 2 certificate for throws. So, and I've had a couple of athletes, disabled athlete, Ray Anderson, who was and she's working with Kerry Smith now, who's a specialist in that. She's going really well. But we were lucky to said, Ray, let's come and do a bit of long jump. And as a disabled athlete, she made it to the Glasgow Com Games and came sixth in long jump in back then. So it was it's good to do. I think you get an understanding with a lot of events, and especially as you're developing as a coach, to do a number of the training courses to broaden your knowledge, and it comes back to help you across any event that you end up specialising in, and that you have more of a passion for. That's what usually leads you to developing what you like to do.
I think Matt, some of your philosophies are starting to show through. But what are some of your core coaching beliefs or philosophies or standards that you really anchor your coaching into?
Yeah, it's definitely, you have to enjoy the sport. You know, the athletes have to be there because they want to be. That's you have parents, coaches, but the athlete has to be driving the process, I think, is the key thing. That's what keeps them in the sport. And I really think, and that's what I actually try to develop a passion for them to enjoy training, with part of the process that we do with our strength and conditioning, and bring it on really slowly. And I see that in the athletes who have developed past, through that into that senior ranks. We've got have a few now that they just enjoy part of the training process and training. The competing becomes secondary because they know that they've done the work and they enjoy the training and had fun. It's got to be fun, and they enjoy improving, and that just leads into good performances when they compete.
I know. From what I've, when we've spoken before, I know you're very big on taking it slowly, and trying to keep the athletes injury free. Have I got that right?
Yeah, it's important to listen to your body, and athletes, like we do a lot of plyometrics and everything, but it's got to be in stages, and if they're not doing it properly, you've got to take them back and you do a lot of mini stuff to build up into bigger type movements. Like for me, as a triple jump example, Nicola has never done that, and I think if she did it now, it'd be close to, but she's in the high jump. But some of the things that she's doing with her bounding and plyometrics and power, I think she would go close to knocking off the Australian record for triple jump. But that's something that might happen later. But for me, even triple jump for little A's, I believe it should be a standing event instead of with speed, to just develop a movement pattern that is off the ground and running off the ground and developing that rather than trying to do things at speed. It's one of my little beliefs, and one of the things we do with all the plyometrics and that we do is to develop that pattern of just movement and activating glutes and body position, and that really works really well for the athletes, I think, rather than and I pride ourselves in being injury free with athletes and developing. There was an interesting thing we had a young girl. She was 12, came to our high jump session, and she's doing things, and she said, "Oh, my heels hurt. I've got sore Osgood's ladders, Sever's disease, these typical little A's growth in things that they have at that age." So we took her aside and said, "Now, this is how you release your glutes with this ball. Does that hurt?" "Yes, it hurts," And she did that, and she was really good. Took it away, did it at home, and in about a week and a half, she came back. "I don't have those issues anymore." And it's a matter of keeping the hips moving, some of those little things, and maintenance, and getting athletes to be able to one of the things we use, that you have to trigger release glutes first before foam rolling. So otherwise, you foam roll and you don't trigger release, nothing happens. So you have to release those points and then foam roll, and the athlete is 100%.
Some good advice there, Matt. I'll tell you what. We've got a few Little Athletics people online and listening, and I'll be a Little Athletics audience. Looking at this, if or listening to it,
Yep.
if I release the audio. Now, I'm just really interested. I've had a few questions come in. People had the chance to list what they would like to learn as
Yeah.
in the registration form. If you have a new athlete come to you, Matt, and I know you probably don't coach, as low as sort of 9 or 10. I might be wrong, you might, but if you had a little 9 or 10-year-old who was scissoring in the high jump, and I might be taking you back a few years here when you're coaching this. I mean, are there any fundamentals that you really think should be taught at that age for scissors high jumping first, I suppose?
I think one of the big things is being able to run properly over objects. So one of the things I see with younger athletes like that, they tend to just not run properly to the bar. They tend to just block and be low in the hips instead of running through tall and cycling through the run up, and being able to learn how to do that and scissor, it carries them through to later on as they advance. But I think a lot of the stuff with I've helped a few under nines over the years, and they can be frustrating. And one of the things I see a lot, that those kids find it hard because they're going through some growth changes, and their mental capacity to control their bodies is not quite there at that stage. So they really struggle with that. So it's best to not put too much pressure on them, so that they just enjoy it, and whatever they do, have fun, jumping over the bar and scissor, and don't I've seen it before where there's too much pressure on them and they end up getting too tense and they can't jump properly, because in the end, you're trying to get them to do something, but they can't do it because their bodies aren't able to reproduce what you're trying to get them to do, because their core strength is non-existent. They don't have, they're not using their glutes, say, they're just muscle development is not there yet. Muscles haven't switched on, for them to create body awareness, it's because they just got too many issues with growth and that. So they're better off I think scissors is great for that age group, and just learning to run properly and then jump over an object is the main thing, I think.
So what do you think of that? The Little Athletics Australia rule that was brought in a couple of years ago, that all 9s and 10s have to do scissors. They're not allowed to flop at that age group. What do you think of that decision, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's a really good move, because one of the things I see, what used to happen is athletes would not jump, but if they were a bit taller and gangly and their body couldn't jump up because they were taller, they would just lead with their arm and flop onto the bags. They would go quite well and probably win. They might have been 5'10" at that age, at 10 years old, and they would just not even jump, and they'd land over the bar, and it creates bad habits, and it's very hard to get them out of that if they've done that since they were under 9s. So learning how to run up and scissor is a good thing, as long as when you scissor, the foot strike is coming back under the hips and not blocking and pushed out in front is bad for the kids. The foot's got to be under the hips and running off the takeoff, okay? And that creates a non-injury free environment for them then, is they're learning to run off the takeoff, stay tall, and get a free leg driving up over the bar. I think that's a good thing.
And when they are ready to start doing the flop, you decide as a coach or whatever that, they're up to that point. I mean, what are some initial things that you might start introducing then, Matt? How do you introduce the flop, and what do you look for fundamentally?
Well, you still maintain the scissors, because I had a girl that was probably scissoring still. What you do is, when you scissor, you keep scissoring, and when you miss it, you go to the flop. And sometimes some kids scissor higher than they can flop. I've had a kid that can scissor 160 but couldn't only flop 155. So, that depends on individuals. Some kids are naturally able to flop. I see it's a bit of a thing. I've had kids that do everything and you try to teach them to flop, and that can be a development thing, the way their neural patterns are, that you just let them still enjoy it. 13, 14, they scissor and they go okay, but it can be a neural thing that they can't flop at that stage, where I've seen it where their core strength for flopping is not quite there, so they drop their hips out onto the bar because they're not strong enough in the core to hold a position in the arch to lift their knees to create a rotation over the bar. So it can be a core strength thing that they struggle with. The flop is a big issue, I think.
I'll tell you what, Matt, too, a big thing that a lot of people come to me about, and I don't know if there's one answer to this, but how do you teach athletes to measure that flop run up? Do you have your own? I know it's difficult to explain, without actually showing people, but do you have your own system? Do you have your own formula? How do you start? How do you teach that run up for the flop?
I've seen a few variations over the years of the flop, and you think the putting a check mark on the curve is the start. For smaller, younger kids, you walk out 4 and 3 across to have your first corner mark, or 5 and 4 for an older, taller, bigger athlete, and that creates that corner. So then you have what you want to create that I've seen is open J curve. You don't want to create a C run up because that makes it very hard, especially bigger athletes who tend to be high jumpers. They find it hard to get acceleration and movement around a C, and it's not accurate. I see that a lot in schools. I'll run about half a mile around the C, and it's not accurate, and it's very. So what you do is 5-4, say for a bigger, taller athlete, and then what we do from the upright is move across 2 steps, and then line up where the corner marker is, and you walk out 13 steps. So if that makes sense, I've drawn a little bit of a. Hang on, I'll get. People might be able to see this. There's a. I'm back. Is that?
We can sort of see that. Yes, we can.
You can
Thanks,
see
Matt.
that. That's the curve, and it's. And an easy way to do it is that 5-4, 2 steps across from the upright, and then walk out directly over your corner mark on an open J, 13 steps. And the amount of times I've done that with a new athlete, and they run up works out perfectly straight away. So I've been using that, and then with new kids, and they go, oh yeah, that works out okay.
That's good, because there are so many formulas, aren't there? You read up on all these different formulas, and everyone's got their own way of doing it.
I think you keep it as simple as you can.
Yeah. No, yeah. Hopefully no need for tape measures, or I mean, did you ever use tape measures, or is it more just stepping out the run up? Matt?
I went down that track a few years ago, and a while ago actually, and you get the hypotenuse, and you work it all out with the tape measures, but when you get in the big league and you've got a high level, you're trying to do that, and you've got athletes who are pretty mean and keen, and they're running over your marker and your tapes, and no one's going to help you, and they're making it hard for you to measure your run up like that. You have to come up with a system that so for a high level athlete. And what we do is mark out the corner, 5-4, which Nicola would use little dolly steps with the 1 foot after another, to make it accurate, her feet. So she'll mark out that with her feet. And then from the upright, she'll walk horizontally to the bags with her feet, put a shoe down, okay, to mark where that point is, and a bit of tape as well. But then she'll square her shoulders up with the bags to square her body, and then look at a point that is in the distance against the fence, square to the bags. Then she'll walk out there exactly, put a shoe there. Then she'll walk back to her marker where that point is, and dolly step out and walk towards the shoe, which gives her a guide to where run up is. So she'll walk out like hers is about 60, 64, 65 steps to put her marker down. And that's,
so it can make it as simple as we can, but it still can be quite complex, can't it?
It's complex, yeah. So you've got dolly steps across and then out to that main point, and then you've got the curve that you run towards that curve to start your bend. So,
You know, we mentioned before, kids putting out their hands towards the high jump bar. I mean, a lot of kids are scared of high jump, Matt. You've
yeah,
seen that, you know.
I've seen
How,
that over the years.
how do you, what would you do to stop kids balking at the bar?
There's a great drill that you do when you're, getting them to work is you make them run with the free arm in the air. So you hold it up and they run and they have to jump and not put the arm out or anything. Is because sometimes that arm is the thing that it's a bit of a rudder. So with kids, what you want to do is have them lean away from the bar and have the foot come under the hips and hold the takeoff with a knee drive and get up in the air first. That's the king with high jump that allows them to get high. So they have to hold that position and then they move into the arch. So I see a lot of coaches or whatever concentrating too much on over the bar and what happens in the air. Even with Nicola and athletes, even with my long jumpers, we work on what you have to do in a landing, but you can't concentrate on that. It has to be something that's in the back of your head. So if you spend too much time concentrating on through the air or in the landing in the long jump pit, you'll go straight into the landing or you'll go straight into the landing in the takeoff and you won't take off. So what you have to do is work on holding a left side or a right side, depending on which side you jump on, or with the long jumpers, holding a position where you get up and get the knee drive into a position first. So some of the drills that we do is knee drive drills with a flexi bar we hold across there where you just hold a lean, jump up, hold the knee drive where you have to hit the bar with the takeoff with your knee. Or long jump, you have to hold a position with a run off on the takeoff and your hips are there and you haven't done anything else except hold a knee drive. So the best thing to do is separate two facets out from the jump. What I like to see is a drive and then the hips and the position in the air is a separate thing altogether. But you can't concentrate on the second bit. It's very difficult.
And those kids, Matt, who are really scared of the bar, like they're just terrified of it. I mean, do you use a flexible bar? Do you use no bar? What would you do with a kid like that?
Yeah, flexi bar is really good. Yeah, I think I always use a flexi bar. The way, even now with high level athletes, we go, what do we want to? We want to concentrate on the facet of the jump, but we don't want to think of the bar. So we just use a flexi bar for a while, and then as competition comes in, you go to a bar. With about a month out or so, you're just working on the bar. But if you want to change something, if you want to have an athlete change a particular technical movement, you can put a flexi bar and they don't have to think about it. They're just working on what they have to do at training.
And I suppose we've talked a little bit about errors that kids make in long jump, but what high jump? Sorry, but what are the big ones you see? What are some, 2 or 3 main high jumping errors that you see out there, Matt, that if kids made adjustments, it'd help them a lot?
Yeah, I see running as one of the big things. They don't run tall and they're not cycling through the run up. So it's interesting running it's funny. I've had some kids who struggling and you get them to, I just say, look, how do you run 100 meters, and you'll find out which athletes are maybe speed jumpers and which aren't. Some athletes like to spend more time on the ground, others like speed. And I've had a few athletes who go, okay, I just want you to lean away from the bar and then cycle, run properly and take off. And they've just immediately improved 100% just from running technique to the bar and then holding a position at the takeoff. You can find if you lean and run properly with the takeoff has to be under the hips and the knee drive coming through over that. And the athlete feels nothing off the takeoff. It's not a issue where they're having a problem with like ankles or feet. They have to hold those. If you hold those angles off the curve, and you have a good position of leaning away from the bar, a lot of the technical side in the air becomes a little bit automatic, where the body tends to move into that position in quite freely. If they can achieve that, all athletes are different, for young athletes who struggle with all of that, I think getting them to run properly and just have a low bar, and just we do lots of drills where you just do running up to the bar and you're holding a knee drive and holding a takeoff and getting used to that.
I'm just gonna throw one more question at you, Matt, and then I might invite, if anybody. I mean, there's a couple of questions in the chat box that we might go to, but please feel free to put questions in the chat box. Or, as I said, even put your you can ask a question using your audio if you want. Everybody, you can just put a virtual hand up there. But Matt, we were speaking about this before we came on. We're sort of in times where you maybe can't use athletics facilities, or people don't have access to them, whether it's now or at any time. What type of things can you do to practice for high jump if you're a young athlete and you don't have access or regular access to high jump landing equipment or mats?
Yeah, so what we're doing at the moment, is got a few guys doing this, and we have like a little plyometric circuit where we put cones in a circle. We work out the run up, 5. We've got a 5-5 circle, so you put them around the circle. And you get into running around the circle, leaning. You do that. You do we call it a Horsey Drill, where you have the foot coming under the hips, and you're just doing that continuously, leaning around the curve. So you're doing that, and you're doing both sides, because it's important neurologically to work both sides of the body. So we work one side around the curve, left side around the curve, and then we do sandpit type work where you can put bars and things on a sandpit, and we just do knee drives and land in the sandpit. We run up on your curve, run up, and you do curve runs, like mark out your run up, how you run, and you're just practicing your run up and a knee drive that lands in the sandpit. So if you don't have, and what you find, you do that preparation and do that continuously, that when you go back to jumping in a high jump environment, the athletes have had all this improvement in their running form and their through these drills and their positions that they actually they go quite well when they come back again when they're able to access the equipment. And we try to do little comps. Like, I'm lucky, I've got a bit of access to a vertical height jump test, and at the moment with our long jumpers we're doing 5-step approach, where we're trying to see who's leading the competition, so through this period where we can't get comps. And I think Katie Gunn leads with almost 5 meters with a 5-step approach, which is great.
What type of, I just see that someone, now Robert's just put a question in, it was early, I'm sorry it's taken a while to get to it, Robert, but you talked about foam rolling before, Matt.
Yeah.
Should all athletes, young athletes, be doing this? I mean, should it start at a certain age? Should it, what are your thoughts on foam rolling, and who should be doing it, maybe what they should be doing?
And I like, with tennis balls triggering, I think they could all do that, because what I've seen, it's a benefit. The young athletes learn to just sit on the ball and release their glutes, because what I see a lot of when they have body shape changes, the whole structure of the body is changing, and with a lot of muscles, especially around the hips, they tend to switch off quite freely, and that creates, say the glute, if you're doing something as an exercise, the glute will tend to lock up a little bit and switch off, and the ITB, which connects to the knee, will get tight, and that's where they experience maybe some knee issues, where that tends to pull the knee over. So if they're working on as stretching, trigger releasing the glutes, because I don't think it's a negative that causes any issues. It's a soft ball, and you're just sitting on the thing, and you're just rolling around and releasing. Well, all it is putting pressure on a point that releases, and then you just foam roll that. With a soft foam roller is better for younger kids, I think, rather than anything with knobby bits on it. But I think that learning that at an early age, and that carries through, that I've seen, that it's something that older athletes do quite frequently, that as they progress up to high chain is something that happens all the time. They get used to it. So I think that's probably something that should be passed on through education of kids and everything. And what the ones who do that, I find they just don't have the issues that other kids have.
Okay, so we talked about foam rolling.
Yeah.
What other conditioning should kids be doing at a young age? You know, is there any strength stuff you think is appropriate for that little athletics age group, Matt? And, you know, are there any particular things you think they should be doing or developing at that age?
It's a lot of stuff that revolves around coordination through the hips. So if you're doing lunges, they need to be done where the hips are stable. So you have to teach glutes and hips to be working when you're doing lunges. Like I've seen football players do lunges and I'm going, my God, that's not a lunge. You know, and you need to step over the hips, you know, step over the knee and into a good position where you're using your glutes. Your trunk is not coming forward over the knee, your knee's not too far. Like all those exercises, if you do them properly, they have a benefit. If you don't do them properly, one of the exercises I see done wrong is the A skip, where I see the hips and the glutes should be activated with the A skip, where a lot of times I see a person just dropping. If I could, probably can't see where they're doing an A skip and they're doing this. Their hips are dropping out, and it's just not doing anything for the athlete to warm up and progress for that exercise. So I think with younger athletes, learning for them to use the glutes, and they don't have to be doing, they're not doing anything major. I think they could do squat jumps with their body weight is quite good. But one thing we like to do is use a med ball, and you balance on the med ball with your feet. Take your shoes off. So you're using your feet to hold on to the ball, and it's strengthening the feet at the same time. And because you're on the ball balancing, and what we try to do there, and you can do it in the sand pit, so if they fall off, they don't hurt themselves. So you're on the sand pit, and they do a squat. So the squat on the ball teaches the center of gravity to be in the right spot. Otherwise, they fall off. If they lean too far forward or if their knees come out, it doesn't work. Squatting on a ball, say in a sand pit, gives them the right profile, because they'll feel the movement. If they'll fall off, and then as they get better at that, they're able to do it. And what I've done, you put your arm out, and they hold on to that to get used to the balance. You know, and the young kids, like any age, can do that sort of stuff. And then we progress to single leg squats, and they can be quite good as well. You know, the athletes get quite good at that sort of thing, because one of the things with single leg squats on the ground, if the knee comes in because the glute med or glute min doesn't work properly, so the knee will automatically come in. So they have to switch glute med and glute min on for that to work properly. So on a med ball, they get used to doing that, and they just progress slowly, just do little bits. And the other area I like is if an athletics club has an overhead bar that the kids can do chin-ups and swing around, do all those things that I don't particularly do a lot of sit-ups and things on the ground. We tend to do them in the air. Like, I think we do lots of, in my gym stuff, we do lots of rings and unstable environments where the athlete's doing a lot of upper body and a lot of core work in a suspended type environment, which improves. I've had athletes that can do 500 sit-ups on the ground that I say, come and swing around the bar, and they can't even lift their legs up around the bar, you know, because they're not used to having a core that allows the whole body to work together as a unit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting, those types of activities that kids tend to enjoy. I mean, I had visions of, you know, when you're talking about the work standing on the medicine balls, of kids laughing and giggling, and, you know, maybe even you said they might hold onto your arm, but I suppose they could work in partners too, you know, one person providing support, and, you know, it'd be really,
social distancing now.
At the moment might be difficult, right? Might be difficult, but I can just imagine that being a challenging interesting type, strength conditioning type activity.
And we do a lot of strength and conditioning stuff. We do a lot in soft sand, so the athletes can learn to hop, jump, and do single leg hops in the soft sand. So they're not got a lot of impact in there at an early age, where they're not creating joint issues and bad form, but they're learning to, say, hop on through the sandpit on soft sand is great for developing young kids with plyometric exercises without creating the load, but also working that helps with their strength, and that works on their development. And as they hop and bounce, say, in the soft sand, and if they're efficient with the foot coming under the hips, they actually move over the top of the sand. But if they block and do things that you don't want them to do on the track, they don't go anywhere in sand. So it actually is quite a good tool to teach them how to move properly over the surface of the ground.
I see that foot coming under the hips has come up a few times and avoiding the blocking, Matt. So I think, if people take something, at least, I'm sure they're taking a lot away, but that'll be one thing that they'll actually really take away from this particular session, I'd say. Yeah,
it's a major issue that I see that creates a lot of problems for athletes.
Yeah, and that running is so important to high jump too. I think people are, taking that away too. It's more than just jumping, isn't it? It's a jumping event, but it's a running event just as much.
And I see the kids that start to learn to run properly with that, they improve a lot with their technique then off that.
Now, I do invite people, if they'd like to, pop questions up in the chat box, or as I said, you can put a virtual hand up if you'd like to ask Matt a question. Through your microphone. I'll keep an eye on those areas. But look, I will ask a couple of other questions if people, need time to do that. Matt, you've seen a lot of athletes over the years, and you've worked, as we said, from grassroots right up to high performance. Are there any standout traits that you've seen in young athletes who have made it to the top? Is there any common traits, or is it, what do you see in those people who make it to the top?
Yeah, definitely. I see that they develop an inbuilt discipline that they carry through. I mean, Nicola, when she was sort of a 12, 13-year-old, was like any kid, She was, I remember Chris Dodd saying with them training, it's like, come on, why don't they just put in 100% and do things? And, I can remember that. And seeing that development of personal where they're disciplined and the things they do, it's like, for example, if they're studying, doing things, they learn to do assignments, they learn to do university work straight away, and they can do as much training as they like. One of the key things to take pressure off as an athlete is their mental capacity to just do things immediately when they can and focus. They don't leave things standing, and they're just 100% disciplined. Well, Nicola, for example, in a high jump comp in the highest level, she has a diary that she completes as she's in the competition, which takes her away from the athletes that are competing. Because she'll do a jump and come back and write in the diary what she felt, what she did, what she thought, and then she'll come and see me at the fence, and I'll tell her that, and it's like it confirms what she thinks and what we work together. A lot of times that's the same and everything, and if anything's different, because it's interesting with her. She's a highly technical person. That what I get her to do from about 17, I had her not look at the competitors in between jumps, because she used to overanalyze stuff. So she would look at them and look at what they're doing and lose a bit of focus on what she's doing, because she's thinking of them. And I would take that away and said, look, what you do is you have to spend the time looking elsewhere while they jump, and then look around and then clap or whatever. She's great at supporting them when they get over, but you don't watch them do the jump. And she's carried that through to, I suppose it was hard for her not to watch. So she fills in a diary and goes through her thing. And by the time then they've jumped, I suppose, so it makes it easier. And we've had a talk and everything in between. But it's quite interesting what we do and what we've developed. And the other thing that's interesting from an athlete point of view, and that we've developed with Nicola, say, which she's taught me this as a coach, is that you want to not tell them what not to do. So if she's blocking or her foot's in front of the hips, you don't want to tell them that. What you've got to do is tell them that they need to bring the foot under the hips. So you tell them what they have to do. If you tell them what they are doing wrong, it reinforces what they're doing wrong, and they'll do that again because they're not looking or picturing, or the mental state is not working on what they're just thinking of what they're doing wrong. They're not correcting it within their own mental state. So what you do is tell them exactly what they need to do to improve, not to create the same problem. That's quite an interesting thing that coaches can find. Like I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, they're doing that wrong," but to find the solution to fix the stuff is the key.
That's a great quote, Matt. That's a very quotable piece of coaching psychology there, I reckon.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Look, Alice has put a couple of questions in the chat box there, Matt. I know we're nearing the end of our talk. We'll try and get through a couple more questions. What's the number one factor, do you think, being an experienced coach, that keeps kids, particularly teenagers, in the sport? And is there anything particularly that you see drives them away?
Yeah, I see a lot of high pressure drives them away. Too much pressure at a young age is a bit of a killer, I think. Sometimes doing too many sports just becomes too much for them. And I think sometimes in this day and age now, we just kill our kids with too much kindness. I've had kids doing 5 sports in a week, and it just becomes horrendous for the kids. They don't get any recovery time, so they need to have recovery. And the ones I see that progress, I've got a number of athletes who I've had from a young age that are up to 20s and that, like young Beth, who won New South Wales Open this year, was quite good. TB jumping over 6 metres. And all of them that I see, they enjoy the squad environment. They enjoy the other training. So we'll do 1 jump a week. The rest of it is around a sprinting session, plyometric session. They do 2 gym sessions, and it's them enjoying physical work and training that leads them to enjoy the sport. If you get them enjoying their physical side of the training, I see that they have a progression. I see the kids who don't enjoy that, and what happens when they get older, if they don't enjoy that training, they don't get better because they don't improve because they're not doing that other work. If they just want to jump all the time to get better, they won't get better at jumping, if that makes sense.
It's sort of counterintuitive in a way, isn't it, really? But it's right. Yeah, you hear that.
So,
yeah.
I think they can do a few sports when they're younger, but as they get older, it's like the ones I see that progress, they taper out of some of those. It's quite good for their development to do a few different sports, but not too many. You just have to draw the line for time and everything. But then the guys who progress in athletics, they start to. That's where I think gym and all of that sort of work for them, getting them involved in that and progressing them slowly through that. I like to start those guys at 13, 14 in the gym environment where they're just learning things. That's like another sport for them that they do. And it creates that as an add-on to their other things that they do that progresses them.
In fact, now Alice's second question sort of relates to what you've just been talking about, multi-sport versus,
Yeah.
What about, within athletics, specialising in an event versus multi-discipline approach?
I encourage like multi-discipline events, and you'll find I like one of my guys is a high jumper and he loves it, but I see him as 100% long jumper and I can see what he does there, but he just doesn't like it. But I'm trying to steer him towards that mode. But it's a bit frustrating because I can see he's quite good at that. And he's coming up 18 and he could jump over 7 meters, but he doesn't do it.
I'll tell you what. Yeah.
And you encourage multi-events, but in the end, I find the event eventually picks the athlete. they start to focus and enjoy it, and you just give them guidance to progress towards that event. And if they're jumping and they want to do something else and they like it, I steer them to that. I do a lot of work with some of Mick Zisti's. He's a great hurdles coach, and we work together, and we just I help some of the kids with his that do long jump, and I have him do some of the sprints guys and everything, and we work together and we work towards whatever their event that they want to focus on. They'll just decide themselves. I think that's important, to let them decide rather than other people deciding for them.
Now, Matt, I'm going to take one. There's one more question in the chat box from Andrew, who's an age manager at Little A. So if I've read this correctly, Andrew has seen over the years progression with his kids that he's been involved with in the age group for a number of years. But long jump seems to be one that there hasn't been much progression in the last year or so. None of them really train in particular. You got any suggestions of what kids can do to improve that long jump? We'll move to your long jump expertise very quickly, Matt.
Yeah, so it's learning how to run off the takeoff, I think. And with long jump, you have to learn to get into the air first and produce power off the ground without blocking and going. What I see with long jump, 100% of kids just block on the board and they go straight into a landing, and it'll never get any better. And they can have issues with their feet and everything then. But learning to run off the board and hold a knee drive and get into the air first and produce power and separate out the landing from the takeoff, they improve a lot better once they get that feeling.
There's that foot under hips again. No blocking, Matt. It's come up
100%,
again.
Yeah,
100%. It's an important one. Yeah,
that's a killer of speed, injuries. It creates a lot of issues. You can do a lot of full run-ups if you don't block on the board.
Now we've only got about 5 minutes left, Matt. So I'm going to have to wind things up pretty soon. It's it's easily filled in an hour here. Just a couple of quick things. How do you continue to learn as a coach? Do you recommend any websites, any books, any courses, any podcasts at all, Matt, that keeps you learning?
Yeah, I've as I said, I've done all of the when it was the Australian Track and Field Coaches Association back in those days when they had the coaching qualifications. I did all of those, and it's the same now. We have a lot of discussions and cross-reference ideas, and Peter Lawler, Max Stedman. As I progress through mentors, I found you learn a lot from mentors, as well as doing various coaching levels was a key. And I talk a lot with overseas coaches now. I'm lucky with one of the guys I know, Carlo Buscicelli from Italy. I've got to know him really well, and he co-wrote Periodization of Strength Training with Tudor Bompa, who's they're the gods of strength training, and he's quite happy to share stuff with me, and we just talk every now and then about different things. Interesting coming into the COVID period, and I was a bit worried about that, of building a big base for a long period of time and having the variety there to keep the athletes going. And what he suggested was you have a period we do soft sand for 4 weeks and strength work. We're doing, whether it's body weight or we do sort of a lot of strength work with the older athletes. And then you move to a power phase of grass plyometrics and ease the load off, but a bit more jumping and that sort of thing. Then you go back into another cycle of strength and soft sand, and then into a power phase. So you have a cyclic type arrangement through the year to get you through. And we've introduced little testing periods in that, where the athletes feel like they have little competition periods within that little block to see how they're going and everything. And having that input from different people that I know, that you just foster relationships with mentors and people that who know things. It really is really helpful. I think you learn a lot that way.
Hey Matt, really quickly, quick questions come up now. We're going to have to fire through some questions real quick here with some quick answers. Heather's just asked about, can you explain just a little bit more about blocking? We've mentioned it a few times, and maybe we've assumed that people might understand what blocking is.
Yeah,
can you sort of expand a little bit about what that blocking is? Because I know you think it's really important.
So what I see with, if an athlete is blocking, their foot strike to take off is very low to the ground. So it becomes a bit of a scoop, a push forward as they're running towards the bar or the long jump pit. They drop the hips, but the foot strike is very low to the ground. Sometimes the athlete might even scrape their spike on the ground. So the way I look at that, where they should pick the foot up and it comes under the hips at the takeoff. And like I'm in engineering, I look at the stroke that they have to create power off the ground. If the foot is low, the stroke is negligible. If you have the foot, say when you're running towards the foot is picked up towards the hamstring and then brought back under the hips, the stroke is a lot longer. So the amount of force that can be generated under the hips, and then the work on the ground is done by the foot. Contact has got to be quite quick. So they have to learn it's almost heel toe off the ground with the foot striding back under the hips, if that makes sense.
And it's avoiding some sort of decelerating type forces, isn't it, Matt? That's the thought behind them. You just don't want them stopping and pulling themselves up.
Yeah, you want to you're pulling themselves up and over the foot strike, and the foot does the work. As it comes under the hips, it lifts, so the athlete gets a bit more air. Where high jumpers tend to go too high in long jump, they're used to going vertical, where it's about I suppose 45 degrees or so off where that correct angle, where the foot is getting that right and getting the power generated from the foot strike through the hips. It's all the power has to be, especially high jump. When I'm looking at a competition, what I see is the foot strike comes under and I see the hips accelerate vertically. If you don't see if the foot strike is not right and the hips are pushed horizontally, the power that they generate off the ground is not transferring properly, and that can be a block or and some athletes can do that quite effectively by blocking, but it creates a lot of knee issues in the patella tendon, and in the end they have a lot of foot problems. They can diminish their time in the sport. Chris Dodd, who I originally coached back in 2007, 2008, 2009, who jumped 223, but in his early years, he used to jump 2 meters off a bit of a block takeoff. He was quite effective at that, but getting him to change that, I worked a lot with Ian Garrett, who jumped 225 or something, I think, and he's quite a good coach and he was a good mentor of mine also, and he was a big component of running off the takeoff. The foot is higher through the strike and then comes under the hips and the foot reacts quickly. You're probably looking at Nicola contacts at 0.17 of a second off the takeoff foot. It's quite 0.17, 0.15 is quite quick, off the takeoff, which is normal for a high-level high jumper. So you're looking for a fast, quick takeoff foot to transfer the power through the hips, which is where it's got to go through for it to be an effective jump.
Okay, thanks for that, Matt. Finally, Matt, what's a number one tip for coaches just starting out? Do you have a number one favourite tip that you'd give to someone new to coaching?
Yeah, I think enjoy the group that you have, and just enjoy bringing everyone through as a good progression, and don't try and jump too quickly to the end result. Like, especially once you get into strength training, it's something that you have to bring athletes through gradually and to progress. The way I've started, I had good athletes and they got better, and all of a sudden I had to do more to keep them progressing. So I had to learn a lot more stuff in gym work, and I find if you have control of all of that and work, either you work with people and have control and you know what they're doing, you need to have that control. If you don't have that control, other people, they can be doing things that kill the athlete, So to learn how to do that progression through as the athlete gets older, that tends to work really well. And power development for athletes, you can get stronger and it can get really strong but slow. So for an athlete, it needs to be strong, but you have to maintain the speed to produce the power. So power work takes time. You can get strong really quick, but then you won't get, the power suffers a little bit, I see, because you end up getting too slow. So all the work that you do to develop the athlete over the years, if you, like, I like to look at an athlete, when I see potential, I'm looking at them going, oh, I've got you for 10 years. You know, that's how I look at it. So you need to produce power. And what you'd find if you do it that way, they have progressions where they improve every year, unless they have major growth issues where their hips get wider and then they just have a year where, you know, it's very difficult, as everyone who coaches knows. But
and lastly, Matt, and we really appreciate your time tonight. You're just really generous with what you're sharing with us. What's next for you as a coach, Matt?
I don't know. I'm just enjoying at the moment. Olympic Games is hopefully coming up next year. Really looking forward to sharing that time with Nicola and everything, and hopefully maybe a little Australian record knocked over somewhere along the line, which is that's the goals over the next 12 months to 2 years. Because it's going to be quite a busy year over the next 2 years, because we've got Com Games, these Olympic Games in 2 years. Hopefully, with everything sorts out with the COVID virus, has been very, very difficult, but it certainly creates athletes who, you know, talking about what drives them. The guys that I have, that they just think, oh, great, we'll spend this time, we'll be better when we come out. You know, that's how they're looking at it. So it's going to be an interesting time in the next 2 years. I think it's going to be quite interesting.
Thanks for that, Matt.